to the Legal Matters Show with me, Ajaz Ali. You're listening to Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton, 87.8 FM, and also live on Facebook as well as YouTube.
Why do you always just look at the poster?
Because I never remember. It's been 4 or 5 years. I never remember. So as you can probably tell, I've got Ash here with me. And also Jim. Sorry, Jim, what's your surname? Sorry?
It's Jim Halliburton.
Jim Halliburton.
But he's also known as the HMO Daddy.
HMO Daddy, yes, that's how I know him. He's been on the circuit for many, many years.
I have indeed.
And knows a thing or two. If you know anything about property, or you need to know anything about property, he's probably a good oracle to speak to.
Always happy to share my experiences and help a fellow landlord.
Great. That's really good to hear. And I'm sure there's many people listening who are landlords or landlords to be. I think a lot of them like to follow Ash as well in his journey and his advice as well. So having someone who's got a lot more knowledge than Ash and I
is Jim.
Yeah, and it's always useful to have around.
Jim is I consider the encyclopedia of property.
That's very kind of you. But there's not much to know. It's not exactly that complicated a topic. So don't be put off by this idea that somehow you've got to be a bit of a genius to do it. I assure you, the amount of knowledge you need to run property is very small compared to, say, what I used to do in lecturing. I used to teach law.
Oh, did you?
So, yeah,
oh, wow.
Me.
Okay.
And put it this way, you learn all you need in about a few hours of law lectures that you'd have to learn to run property. It's not difficult. But then again, I suppose I'm comfortable with it, having spent years doing it. And I'm also a bit unusual in as much as I read up on the subject and try and learn as much as it applies to me. So,
well, I always believe that you as much as you think you're an expert at something, you can never know it all.
Oh,
those who think they know it all don't.
Correct. You're absolutely right. And there's a big difference between knowing the rules and knowing what goes on in practice. That's something which most lawyers and people forget is there's the rules and there's the enforcement of it. And most of the stuff that relates around to property is not enforced.
Absolutely.
And I go to court regularly to evict tenants. Yeah, I'm spot on legally. And the judge just throws it out because he doesn't want to apply the law. And there's not much you can do about it. That's the personality of the judge.
To be fair, we had one about just over a month ago where I looked at the case on the face of it. The client was obviously the landlord. I said, this is going to be thrown out. But it was allowed.
Yep.
I just don't know why.
Correct.
If I was the judge, I would have thrown it out because it didn't have the rent in the scheme, etc. And there's various things. Tenant didn't turn up. I think the judge just couldn't be bothered.
Well, if the tenant doesn't turn up, it does that. But I've had it where a tenant's turned up and they've lied and said they didn't receive the notice.
Yeah.
And we had 2 people serve the notice, and the judge just refused to accept that. And it was clear the tenant was lying. Everything he said was a lie. But the judge decided to side with him for some reason. And you get that perversity. Eventually we got rid of the tenant. It just kept being adjourned, and the tenant went. But all those adjournments cost me a lot of money in lost rent.
Yeah, definitely. So generally, when you do go to evict tenants, in circumstances where you don't really want to, I suppose, because you don't know about the circumstances, what circumstances the tenant is going through. Is it financially? Is it they want? You mentioned in your show with Ash. Is it because they're not paying their rent because they just don't want to? They want to rather spend it on a few nights out, or is it because they are genuinely going through hardship, and therefore they just can't afford it? Which, with the cost of living nowadays, can be understandable.
I've never come across that. As I was saying earlier, I have a no eviction policy. If someone cannot pay the rent, genuinely cannot pay the rent, we'll help them. what I find, it falls into three things. Most of the time, they just don't want to pay the rent and therefore get evicted. The other is if they can't pay the rent, we have a wonderful system here. It's called universal credit, and the government pays, but they refuse to claim universal credit. So they're unemployed, and they seem to think they can live rent-free. But usually they've claimed the unemployment benefit part of their claim, but don't bother claiming for the landlord. And the third one, which is not that often because we bend over backwards, is just refuse to talk to us. They won't discuss things. We try and help them, saying what we can do.
They just bury their heads in the sand.
Well, I'm not sure they're burying their heads in the sand. I think they just deliberately refuse to engage in any way. So we can't tell whether the reason is they are having problems or not. So, but as I say, I'll let the tenants stay. I'm not that desperate to throw people out who genuinely cannot pay, and we will accept a level of arrears for this. But if you really want to get political and then take the debate, how can you cope when you've got the tenant goes to the council or to some housing association, etc., and they just say to the tenant, well, if you want to come and live with us, get yourself evicted from the landlord, so don't bother paying the rent, wait until the bailiffs come, and we'll rehouse you. Well, when you're dealing with competition like that, it's a bit like Tesco's running all the other supermarkets, and he says to them, oh, don't bother paying when you go into Sainsbury's or Asda, and when you get banned from all those stores, you can come and shop with us, but this time you're going to have to pay. That is so difficult, and it's not something that's publicised. We get all this bad press about landlords, but no one actually tells the truth, what's going on out there. Most of the tenants...
No, that's absolutely right. I've had... Sorry to interrupt.
I said most of the tenants I've had have deliberately got themselves evicted. The only council I've had that's changed is Sandwell, who brought in what we call call before you serve, and they will explain to the tenants that they will not rehouse them. They will mediate. And Wolverhampton's just started introducing that side of it as well, that the call before you serve. So if you tell the council that you've got a problem with the tenant, they will mediate and tell the tenant, no, gone are the days when you get evicted from the landlord and we'll rehouse them. That's not going to happen. And they will face up to the issue. Or if there's support they needed. Not only can you get universal credit, but there's a whole load of grants. The councils have been given shed loads of money to help tenants stay if they apply. So there's no reason the tenant cannot pay. It's usually always won't pay.
I've had actually landlords approach me, similar type of scenarios, but where the tenant has said to them, the manipulating the system here, the tenant has said to them that I want to get a council house now. I want you to evict me.
Correct.
Can I butt in there?
Yeah.
You've got to remember that the motivation here is that the tenant at that point no longer wants to stay in your property.
Yeah.
So by you keeping them in the property, you're not actually doing yourself any favours, because if you're not now playing their game, unfortunately, you're now going to see yourself falling into arrears, and you're going to be forced.
So this means clearly that all three of us have had this. I've come across this. So more than once.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a system.
If there's a breakdown in communication, unfortunately, there's only one way that this is going to fall, and that is that the tenant's going to fall in arrears, and it's going to end up going to eviction, and that's what the tenant wants to do.
Yeah.
But the sad fact is, quite often, at that point, when they're being evicted, the council turn around and say to them, sorry, we're not going to rehouse you because you haven't been paying your rent and you've made yourself intentionally homeless. So the poor tenant's left high and dry. So he has to go off and find some other landlords.
No, the reality is that they'll fall into the system. Because if they plead hard enough, chances are they'll end up in emergency housing.
Yeah.
Off the back of emergency housing, they'll then end up...
They'll get in the system again.
Correct. So, once they're out of the private rented accommodation and they fall into emergency housing, which then means that the local authority is paying far more to house that person than what they would have been in local authority property. Because, let's face it, if they go into like a hotel and they're now paying, instead of them now paying, let's say £500 a month for a house, they're now paying £70 a week. Well, £70 a
And
night.
a
A
night,
night,
Yeah,
yeah.
which is equivalent to like £300 a week, and then they're now paying £1,200 a month.
Mm.
Does that make sense, Jim?
It does. Your math's a bit wrong. It's
Yeah.
£500 a week.
No,
2,000.
Yeah, well, I've worked on
2,000
five. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
worked on.
£2,000 they're paying a month, when in the private sector there'd be £500. This is the nonsense of the system. It's not joined up, and the politicians haven't woken up to it. And who cares? It's social landlords are making a killing out of it, and it's all paid for by the taxpayer.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when you do go to evict a tenant, do you tend to use? Do you go down the route of Section 21, Section 8, or a mixture, or do you try to serve both? Or
Are you taking notes here, Ajaz?
eh?
Are you taking notes?
No,
I don't need to take notes.
I always
It's for the benefit of the listeners.
Yeah, it's always for the. I never evict a tenant without cause, and it's always been for rent arrears. So I would evict, even if they're antisocial. If a tenant's antisocial, I just act faster on the rent arrears because they'll be causing me a problem. But every tenant who's antisocial also believes they don't have to pay the rent. It almost goes hand in hand. That the problem tenant, they don't, and upsetting other people. If a tenant's quiet and is struggling, I give him, as I said before, plenty of leeway to try and sort it out and redress the balance, and I'll allow a certain amount of arrears on the rent. It's where they just willfully refuse not to pay. So it's always for fault. I use sections 8, it's called ground 8, which is 8 weeks in arrears. Ground 10 is any arrears. The abolition of Section 21 just doesn't worry me, because in 32 years, I've never used it. I had used it in the early days to try it out and see how it worked. That's the no-fault eviction. But landlords are getting very upset about it, and I can't understand why. What landlord would evict a tenant who's behaving and paying?
That's true.
No, landlords don't do it. It seems to be sort of fiction that happens.
And Section 8's quicker as well.
Pardon?
Section 8's
So
quicker.
it is,
Yeah.
spot on as well.
Yeah.
You've got to give 2 months' notice. Section 8's only 2 weeks' notice. You're in court within 6 weeks, and that's still long. It's not simple. The system is unbelievably bureaucratic to operate. But it happens. I've written a book called DIY Eviction, sort of, to give me a bit of sort of challenge. Not only do I do it, I write about it, because I like it, and it also helps other landlords. So I've covered every situation I've come across when evicting tenants, and wrote it down in my book, showing a landlord how they can easily, quickly, cheaply evict tenants themselves. But most of the time,
I'll market that to any solicitor who wants to get into landlord and tenant law then.
absolutely right. But most of my tenants go if you ask them nicely. And one of the problems I learnt very soon in the game of being a landlord is, if you want a tenant to go, you've got to treat them with great respect, and they'll often go, so you don't have to. I look upon ending up in court as being a sort of failure of communication, of being able to deal with the tenants. Because most of them, if you ask them nicely, saying, look, it's not working out, to go. But I initially started off, you're not paying the rent, you're skiving, you're a parasite, and got really annoyed with the tenants because they weren't paying. And that doesn't work. So the tenant just digs their heels in, while if you are nice to them, often you can get shot of them. Unless, of course, they're trying to get rehoused by the council.
Yeah.
And then they need as they say, their eviction papers to get back in, to be housed by the council, which is a holy grail. But if you look at all these programs, all of them, when they point to bad landlords, it's usually, if you notice, social landlords.
Yes.
Grenfell Tower, that was a social landlord. The lad who died from mould, he was a social landlord. All these pictures and programs where they go on about terrible landlords, water pouring through the ceiling, these are all council or social landlords.
That's true. Have either of you had tenants where, you said some don't want to pay and they don't go and actually claim the benefits that they deserve in order to pay? Have either of you had to ship your or chauffeur your tenants to the council? I know landlords who
When you say chauffeur them to the council,
basically grab them from home. Come on, you need to pay your rent. You need to get there. You go and see the council.
well, no, it's no longer the case
Well,
anymore.
it's not,
It's literally a case of going online and making a claim. And yeah, both Jim and I have members of staff that also assist with that. Would you agree? Would you agree, Jim?
Yes, we have my staff are very good. They'll help you make the claim if you've come unemployed. They will show you how to go about making the claim. It's online. Gone are the days when we used to pick tenants up and take them up to the council house and get them to claim what was called local housing allowance.
It was housing benefit. Then it went to local housing allowance.
That's right. Now it's universal credit, which is, as say, all online. And unfortunately, I'm not a great one for using online and apps and all the rest of it. I thought it was pretty smart to learn how to text. But that was a couple of years ago. So that was my technology.
I've mastered that now.
Yeah, mastered texting. This year it's WhatsApp. I am king of WhatsApping. But all this Instagram, histogram, Facebook stuff. No.
You should get on Snapchat.
Snapchat. Oh,
Yeah,
is that another one? Oh, right.
You'll have all those what do they call them?
Filters.
Filters. Yeah.
Jim's filters.
Yeah. Yeah. You should try it, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah. All the youngsters are doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't have time to do what I do. Never mind getting involved.
In
with all
fact,
these things.
Jim, do you have a TikTok channel?
No, I did. No, I don't. I'm not sure because when I marketed courses and the rest, I brought in specialists to do it. So I know they did have a Facebook for me, but
I think you had it Instagram as well. I think you did have it Instagram.
I think Ash, do you have a TikTok?
I have TokTok, yeah.
TikTok. I think that's something that Jim should be on. I think he's got a lot of knowledge to share, and I think he needs to get on there. You need to get him on there.
Yeah,
I think you got Mario on there though.
It takes a lot of time. Things like TikTok and that take a lot of time, and unfortunately, just very time consuming, and that takes you away from
what you do.
Yeah, from what you do, and we're all limited with time. Would you agree? Jim, I don't know. Jim wakes up. What time do you wake up, Jim?
About 3. Best
wakes
time
up
of the
3
time.
o'clock in the morning, and he sits there, and that's where he writes not his memoirs.
Memoirs, Dave, Jim.
No, he writes his books, he writes his manuals, he writes out all his emails, and he does a large majority of the tasks for the day. Would you agree, Jim?
Absolutely. The best time to get any work done is between 3 and 7 in the morning. After that, the day's gone. It's just interruptions and all the rest of it. All my best work is done in the early hours of the morning.
And what time do you go to bed, Jim?
Depends what I'm up to, but usually about 9, maybe 10 o'clock.
That's it. So he still goes to bed at
Yeah, so he has 5 to 6 hours.
yeah, 6 hours.
Yeah, good night's sleep is 6 hours.
Yeah.
I'd do well. Yeah, it's what I like.
That's
It's
interesting. That is interesting. They do say that most successful people do get up early. Me and Ash, we get up late.
Talk for yourself. Talk for yourself. I wake up early.
Yeah.
Just don't do anything.
I don't do anything. You can wake up early. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, it's about waking up early. Yeah.
That's it.
No, I'm up for 6, generally. Not 3, but 6. For me, it's an achievement. I never used to get out of bed till after 7.
No. Okay.
Right. So, with the eviction, going back to the topic, with evictions, how many of your evictions, after you get the court order, then clearly the next thing in line is wait for them to either leave or then you get bailiffs in. I'm assuming most of the time you have to get bailiffs, do you?
It's changed. When I started doing evictions back in 1990, most of the tenants would leave after you served the notice on them. They'd take about 4 weeks to leave. You're supposed to give them 2 weeks' notice that you're going to evict them for rent arrears, but they usually go after about 4 weeks. And then it was going to court. And once you got a possession order, you got tenants leaving. But it's now more and more awaiting till the bailiffs come.
Sorry to interrupt again, but that is also to do with the council a lot of the time, because they go to the council. Oh, I'm being evicted. I've got a court order. Oh, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
We can't. You can't. No point you coming to us until the bailiff's at your door.
Right. that does happen, and some of them the bailiffs have to evict them, but it's very few. Most of them go the day before the bailiff turns up, and they just play the system. But why it takes so long for bailiffs to act? I was chatting to one. They do 10 a day, and they just say we'll run off our feet. Well, I have to pay £130 to have a tenant evicted. Why can't they employ more bailiffs? I just don't understand the system. It's not doing much for anyone in what they provide. If you follow the American model...
What's the general time frame for a bailiff to come out? So
it's about 2 months now.
Yeah, I was going to say it's about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So even if you get judgment,
Yes.
let's just imagine the date is, for argument's sake, today's the 11th of April. The date's the 11th of April, they've not left. You then go off and apply for a bailiff. Bailiff will now come out 2 months later.
It'll be 6 to 8 weeks is currently. The fastest I've had it. Actually, I can't remember what the fastest. It's probably about 2 or 3 weeks is the fastest. Unless you use High Court bailiffs, but I haven't used those for a while.
They're slightly dearer, aren't they?
Oh, a lot more expensive. They're about £600 as opposed to £130 for one. But I think the rules have changed a bit. Before they'd be able to evict within 48 hours, but they charge more money for it. And I did it once or twice, but most of the time we use the county court bailiffs, unless the tenant's been a real pain.
Is it not worth you employing? If you're employing 50 people a year, if you're evicting 50 people a year, was it not worth you employing a bailiff to work within the company?
Unfortunately, you can't. It has to be a specialist county court bailiff. There's plenty of other types of bailiffs which you can use if you're a commercial landlord and you can have people removed. So the bailiff has to be...
You're paying them through the courts?
You have to pay through the courts. You have to use a county court bailiff. You can't use any old bailiff.
Otherwise, you'd be throwing them out even before going to court.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Which some landlords probably do.
They do.
Yeah.
Some of them do, yes.
And that's where I suppose we could advise the tenants of their rights as tenants. Do you want to mention anything about tenants' rights?
They've got all the rights. It's all down to them. I mean, it's as an HMO landlord, I would get sent to prison if I interfered with the fire detection equipment. I've had tenants in front of the housing standards officers damaging fire protection equipment, taking off door closers while the inspector's been there, and they just say, naughty boy, you can't do that. And you better get it fixed, landlord. And tell your landlord tenant not to. Yet the law's the same. It's
why should the onus be on you when you know clearly and they know clearly that it's a tenant who's done it?
But also, it's against the law. It's the same law that says they shouldn't damage safety equipment, but they just ignore it. The tenant can do no wrong. It's a bit like cyclists. They can cycle up anyway up on the road and the police don't bother with them. But you drive down the road the wrong way around in a car, boom, you'll get stopped and you'll get prosecuted for it. It's a very strange approach. It's the protection's gone to the tenant, and as I say, most of the time it's the tenant who's causing the issues and the antisocial behaviour.
Right.
Try and blame the landlords.
Thank you very much, Jim and Ash. We're coming up to the break, and after the break, I'll have an employment solicitor on, and we'll be talking about employment law. I'm not sure whether you guys are staying around or are you going?
We'll be shooting off now because
right. Thank you for your input, Jim and Ash, and it's been a great half an hour. Love to catch up with you again at some point.
Pleasure. Thanks to meet you.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And guys, if you want to call us, you're welcome to call the studio on 01902 972 150, and we can have a chat after the interval. Thanks.
There we go, Jim.
There we are. Really good. What kind of audience do they have here?
It's a real mix.
There's different avenues, or I don't even know.
Right, Ajaz, we're going to shoot because I've got to get him back as well.
Chai Hub, your specialist street food outlet based on Broad Street, Wolverhampton, that serve all things breakfast, tea and desserts. We specialise in organically sourced desi teas like Karak Chai, pink tea and more. A family-owned business with the aim to give the people of Wolverhampton a taste of the East while providing a modern twist. We also serve sweet dishes, milk cakes, milkshakes and deliciously fried fully loaded donuts. Chai Hub is available to order online on Just Eat and Uber Eats or through our website chaihub.com for an exclusive 10% discount.
Spice up your iftar with traditional spices and flavours from Indus. We go to great lengths to source only the best in Far Eastern flavours, with a wide range of spices, pulses, lentils and essentials for your kitchen cupboards. From our hot chili powder to our range of beans and pulses. Find our range in leading local supermarkets and retailers. Indus, the world's finest foods. Fed up of eating the same thing week in, week out? Want to try something different? Well, your worries and stresses are over. ISO Sushi Wok and Grill, based in Chapel Ash, Wolverhampton, serves fresh, mouth-watering sushi and all HMC approved. We do chicken, beef, lamb chops, rice noodles, burgers, and we also have an extensive vegetarian menu for irresistible flavours and a great taste that'll get you hooked. Check out our menu online at isosushi.co.uk and order direct, or call us on 01902 689 544. Eat fresh, eat healthy, eat ISO.
People know they can rely on freshness, quality and choice when buying from Malik Butchers. For over 50 years, the master team of Malik Butchers have been delighting customers with exceptional halal meats, including premium Angus beef, Wagyu and our famous handcrafted sausages, along with in-house cured meats from the deli and delicious hot street food too. We're also offering next-day nationwide delivery at www.malikbutchers.com. So go take a Butchers. Call in 64 Dunstall Road, WV6 0NJ, or find Malik Butchers across social media.
Shop at Pack Continental Hunter Street in Wolverhampton for quality, choice and great prices too. Pack Continental are specialists for dried spices, powders, lentils and flour. And now for high oil-based fragrances from well-known brands, original scents and Bacor too. Also disposable cutlery and household products. Plus with frozen samosa, kebabs and fish, HMC approved chicken and meat and fresh fruit and veg, all delivered daily. You can pre-order by calling 01902 717792.
Rusty's on Jeffcock Road, Wolverhampton. It's your local halal takeaway with the best food in town. With their huge menu, there's something for everyone, including pizzas, juicy smash burgers, loaded fries, the dreamiest thick milkshakes and more. Why not choose from Rusty's new platters? Perfect for getting the family together at iftar. Place your order online at rustysonline.com and receive 10% discount.
Ramadan's blessed days are the perfect opportunity to reach out to suffering families in the Ummah with our charity. You can do so by donating to one of Ummah Welfare Trust's many projects which are helping our brothers and sisters in Africa, Asia and the Middle East. In these difficult days, charity is one of the best ways to earn Allah's pleasure and protection. To give yours, call 0800 4 0800 11 or visit uwt.org.
Mina Bazaar, one of the UK's biggest collections of Asian bridal wear and fashion. Established for over 25 years, we're now showcasing and taking orders for our brand new catalogue. We have Mina Bazaar's men's bridal wear. We'll be stocking the very best in groom sherwani, fashion kurta and waistcoats. Book an appointment today and get 15% off during Ramadan at Mina Bazaar, 184 Ladypool Road, Birmingham, B12 8JS by calling us on 07970 265 956.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton with me and the Legal Matters Show with me, Ajaz Ali. So before the break, we had Ajaz Ali and Jim here talking about landlord and tenant and the issues they've had with tenants and issues that landlords generally have with tenants and how to evict tenants and the best way to evict tenants. As I mentioned earlier, we now will be moving on to employment law. So we've got a guest we were supposed to have on Zoom, but we're having some difficulty with the Zoom. So I've asked her to kindly call in. I believe I now have her on a call also. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Ajaz, it's Neelam speaking.
Neelam, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So, if I can give a brief introduction for Neelam. Neelam Afzal, I believe her full name is. She's a local celebrity for Birmingham as far as, I'll call her a bit of a networking queen when it comes to any Asian events. There's not hardly an event where I've been and not seen Neelam there. Either part of the organization team or part of one of the other guests. So she clearly gets around a bit, and apparently she knows her stuff as well when it comes to employment law. I think that should be a fair introduction for you, Neelam.
I think, yeah, I like the networking queen. No, so I mean, I do quite a few things. I think, Ajaz, as you know, I'm vice president of the Asian Business Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
I also sit on the Greater Birmingham Chamber Policy as well, so part of the part of the team there as well. And Wildings, and then Birmingham.
Yeah,
Law
of course, you're a
Society.
partner at Wildings as well. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And employment solicitor first and foremost. I do that in my daytime job. That's my daytime job.
Right, brilliant. Sorry, we're still trying to try and get you onto the Zoom as well. Oh, yeah, there you are.
Connected. It's actually connected. So let me just join.
You can put if you put the phone down now, and hopefully we'll have you live on Zoom as well.
There we go.
Fantastic. Yeah, we see half of Neelam.
Oh, you can only see half.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Is that better?
Nice offices.
Yeah, I was trying to get the banner in, and the lighting's not so great. I think I need the circle light, but.
No, you're better off staying there. Right. Okay. So Neelam, tell me, how long have you been practicing employment law?
So I've been practicing employment law now for about 7-8 years. Prior to that, I've actually been qualified since 2008.
Okay, longer than me.
So I used to be a personal injury lawyer, but I used to deal with multi-track cases, some really interesting six-figure claim cases, which we still do here at Wildings.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so, and then the PI market was changing, personal injury was changing, and decided, right, I wanted to become an employment lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the kind of nice change into claimant and respondent work. And so I work for businesses and employees, and I've been doing that now for 8 years. And I've also got a master's as well in employment law.
So you do know a bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, masters. I didn't bother with my masters. I thought it was too much effort.
Oh no, I do love. I do like doing these things and going off. And I mean, I did my masters in my mid-30s. That's just showing my age now. Mid-30s.
That was about 20 years ago, was it?
Sorry?
Nothing. Sorry, I said that was about 2 years ago, was it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a bit of a running joke with Neelam where, I tend to, whenever I see her, or call her auntie. But she's younger than me, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Right, Neelam, so we've only got about 20 minutes to discuss what we need to discuss. So shall we get into it? Because the whole purpose of us being here is so that the community at large, local community and community at large, get something from this. There's no point us coming to these shows and not we can have a natter at any time, but if we can give something back to the community. That's what matters. So let's talk about employment law. So you deal with employment law from the employee side or the employer side, or do you deal with both?
Both. I do both. And I think it's really important that I also see, when I'm putting forward arguments for employers or employees, I can see both sides. So, I mean, predominantly for businesses, getting your initial paperwork is really important.
Yeah, I was about to ask you what should businesses do to protect themselves? For instance, if I was to set up a new business, and I thought, I'm taking on 4, 5, 6 employees, in my head, I'm thinking, or my plan is to grow to 10, 20, 15, whatever, employees wise. What should I have in place? What is required? Where do I go? What do I do?
Okay, so the first starting point is what we in law call a Section 1 statement. And Section 1 statement used to be an offer letter, or the alternative could be a contract of employment. And you had previously, you had up to 2 months, subject to a few exceptions, to provide an employee with that document. Now, the rules changed some years ago where you've got to give the employees the terms of a Section 1 statement, i.e. a contract of employment, which is the easiest way to put it, which has certain terms, certain things in there about the conditions, like your rate of pay, your hours, your benefits, your location for work, all the key terms, and you have to provide that to an employee on the start of their employment, on the commencement of their employment. So day one, they have to have that document.
Okay.
You can give it before, and that's absolutely fine. And this was a key change that came about some years ago, where people were still under the impression that you can give a contract. I mean, Ajaz, I've got clients who I've come across who are now clients, but when I first entered into a retainer with them, they didn't have contracts in place. They didn't have any documentation in place. They didn't realize that they had to give a contract. And some people would go, oh, well, we could do it later on, or we could do it a year down the line, or 2 years down the line. The problem with that is when then there's a dispute.
Yes.
You rely on that document.
Yeah. So, quick one. So, what protection do they have if they don't? Do they have any protection?
Okay. Yes. So there is protection. They could bring a claim. They always bring it in conjunction, possibly with something else. So it's not a standalone claim, and it's up to 2 to 4 weeks of the person's wages. And you can bring that as part and parcel with another claim. The difficulty is, and I've seen this often in practice, when we get into other areas of dispute, like, for example, 2P transfers. I've seen a recent case where there was and for the listeners who don't know what 2P transfer is, complex area, but it's where a business is buying out another business, but buying out the actual entity. So, like, for example, I'm at Wildings Solicitors. They're not just buying the building, but they're also buying Wildings as a business.
Sure.
And then part of that is the transfer that happens of that business, where the employees will transfer from the outgoing employer to the incoming employer. Now, there's lots of law around this about what are dedicated employees. So it's a group of people who are assigned to that particular organized group. But if you haven't got it set out in a contract as to, for example, it's very important that the job description sets out what you're doing. If you're allocated to a particular contract, job descriptions are really important. Now, as a result of, for example, certain things not happening in this particular scenario, what's happened is the employees have gone to transfer over. The incoming employer said, nope, don't want them. The employees are then left in limbo.
Yeah.
Who then have gone off and have brought unfair dismissal claims, and failure to consult claims, and that simply could have been avoided and the whole argument is around the fact that were they allocated a dedicated team to this particular contract that transferred out. So it wasn't the whole company, it was a particular contract. Now, in this case, had they, looking back in hindsight, it's always great. We always look back and go, wish we'd done it this way, or wish we'd done it this way.
Yeah, that's always the case.
But the advice is that what you do is you could have put together some really structured documents from the outset, contracts, job descriptions, staff handbooks, policies and procedures. If you are changing the way your business is working because you want to focus on a particular service level contract and you're assigning these people to a particular group, you would have set it out at that point in a document and said, here is an internal memo, you guys are now part of the team. So going back to your question, what should an employer do, is your first and foremost is your contract.
Yes.
Your second is your staff handbook that's got your policies and procedures, particularly things like your grievance and your disciplinary policy. Because I often get employers say, well, look, how can I get rid of somebody? Because they keep doing this and they keep doing this and they keep doing this and they're constantly late. Or they're constantly doing this. And I'll say, well, have you got a handbook? Have you got your staff procedures set out? Yes, you can do something.
I agree with you on the handbook, but will they not also be protected by statute?
Okay, so the ACAS guidelines were actually statutory, but they're no longer statutory. They're not.
Okay.
They are therefore good guidance.
Okay.
So what they're there for is good guidance for employers, and tribunals will look at them and say, well, did they follow the disciplinary process as set out by ACAS? They'll refer to that, but you've got to bear in mind, Ajaz, it's a very standard policy, very basic. It's not tailored to a particular business or a particular sector or a particular industry. But it's important that you have your own policies set out. Like, for example,
well, I think go on, sorry.
A dress code policy.
Yes.
Sorry, a dress code policy. I've often people saying, look, my staff are turning up in jeans and dungarees and trainers, and not often, but sometimes I've had that happen. That's not in the ACAS code.
Okay. I know people who've had to tell their staff to, in office settings, to actually, okay, we don't mind you not having a tie on, but trainers and that we don't accept. Whereas there's no policies in place. So
that's the importance of the policies.
No, definitely. So can a business owner, for instance, who you've said you've had plenty of clients where you've taken them on and then they never actually had any contracts in place with their employees. So can a business owner today, someone who's had an employee for say 5 years, can a business owner now turn around to that employee and say, sign this contract?
As long as it's on the terms that have been agreed verbally. So, for example, if an employer,
what if there was nothing agreed? For instance, I don't know. Say if I have an employee who has been there for so long and then wants to. I then want to get them to sign this contract. That part of that contract says that they have to give, 8 weeks notice to leave. But previously there's nothing said about that. But now I feel that person is of importance to the firm, for instance. Would that be unreasonable of me to ask them to sign that? Whereas they probably feel that they were protected by, not statute anymore, I suppose, but the guidelines, which would probably be, is it 1 week or something?
Yeah, so it's 1 week for every year that's worked, up to 12. And that's with the employer giving notice, not the other way.
Okay. What about the other way around? Is it just 1 week?
Well, there's no actual stipulation as to how long it is the other way around.
Which maybe we need to rebel and get a petition together.
But the difficulty as well, Ajaz, and I'm just digressing here, is that sometimes when employees don't give that notice and walk, actually, and I've had
it's probably better anyway.
Yeah, sometimes it works for a business because it's like, okay, well, we don't have to pay them, they're not in the business. But then sometimes it doesn't work, especially when they need to then recruit. And then I've got an employer saying, well, they've left, they're not giving me all their notice. But had I not given them the notice, they would have sued me, A, for breach of contract, and B, for unpaid wages or notice pay. So there is a disparity in that, in terms of, there are steps employers can take.
I suppose my head's working again on this point that I raised with a contract. Now, if, for instance, the employee doesn't want to sign that contract, if they were, for instance, getting a pay rise, etc., and their role was being, well, it's a different role or slightly different role, I suppose then an employee can insist on a contract for that.
Yeah, so if we we go back to the concepts, which I'm not going to go through.
No, we've only got 8.5 minutes. So
consideration acceptance, right? So what you've got is, if, let's say, for example, you're changing the terms, but in consideration, you're giving them a pay increase, or you're giving them a better role or some sort of perk or benefit, then that's your consideration. And then the employee's got the option of obviously accepting it. And more than likely, 9 times out of 10, an employee's not going to say no if that kind of scenario is happening. If, however, you've got potentially disgruntled employees, or you're not giving anything extra, then you would, obviously the statutory position is the employer to give that statutory notice, but you would have to try to come to some sort of agreement with that individual on the terms. So it may not be that you get everything you're looking for, but it may be a halfway house where you get some sort of notice.
Sure.
And it would be quite reasonable in a contract to have some sort of notice. What that looks like, whether it's a day or a week, 20 days, is a matter for discussion. But I would say, and this is, I suppose, it goes back to the importance of having the contract in the first place. But what I would say to any business, any listeners out there who are employers, just make sure that you do have contracts. It's never too late to put them in place. I've gone into businesses, and what we've done is we've rolled out contracts for the staff in terms of, and they've been quite generic, but at least we've put those things in place. And then the handbook's then a further narrative, because you don't need an agreement on a handbook.
No.
So the agreement, you can then put in the handbook in place. And we're talking about businesses that don't have unions, by the way.
Sure.
Or they're not union members, because there's different set of rules that apply for where we've got unions or union membership.
Sure. Yeah. Well, generally, if there's unions involved, normally I assume the HR, etc., will be quite rigid anyway.
Yeah.
So it's more. We're normally mainly talking about small businesses here.
Yeah. I think the other thing I want to emphasize, Ajaz, as well, is with businesses, it's very important that if you go through certain changes, to ensure that you document it, but more important, you document it with your staff member. And I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, you've had an agreement on giving somebody a pay increase, but with some sort of bonus structure.
Yeah.
Or some sort of incentive. And often what happens is, the boss will talk about it with the individual staff, and it'll be like, yeah, okay, no, that's fine, we trust you, that kind of whole thing happens. And then when it comes to the paycheck at the end of the month, and the staff member opens it thinking, hang on a minute, where's the rest of this? And then you've got a dispute that then potentially brews, and it turns into something quite horrible as well. There could be, it goes on to other areas like constructive unfair dismissal, or a breach of contract. So it's really important that when you are making changes in your business, be it how trivial, I know it says it because it's a paper exercise, but be it how trivial it is, just make sure that it's all documented.
Agree.
At the very least, to your staff member, to say, this is what we've agreed.
Yeah, even if it's in an email across to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I would say to your listeners as well. And I think that's really, really key, because I think obviously a lot of disputes can be avoided without that kind of with those things in place. Definitely.
So with say a new employer, what if they needed a contract doing employment contract? What's the average cost of an employment contract that they have to pay? Say if they were coming to your firm, etc.
Okay. So it all comes down to numbers. Let's say, for example, so if we're doing a basic contract,
because sometimes people shy away from these things because they think, oh, I don't want to pay, oh, it'll cost me too much.
The cost, do you know what? The cost isn't significant. So if you've got a basic contract, and the reason why I'm saying basic in that way is because they haven't got enhanced confidentiality clauses. because you would need that for some sectors. If they haven't got restrictive covenants, and what I'm going to talk about there is things for your listeners, there will be restrictions from stopping them competing, taking your clients, poaching your staff. So if they haven't got all of those things in there, because we tailor those to the scenario.
Yeah, people like companies like yours and ours would probably need them in there.
100%.
Yeah.
And we can touch on that, because no doubt there'll be lots of listeners out there who have got no restrictions and haven't really thought about how to protect their business until somebody leaves.
Yes.
The other thing about is also data theft. I've seen people just before they leave, they're like, you're plugging your
USB
memory devices to copy things.
Yeah.
And so leaving those things aside, a very basic contract, $250 plus VAT. In that, we also do a privacy statement, so that's GDPR compliant, about how the employer is going to use your data. So there's a privacy statement. Now, if I get a business, let's say for argument's sake, if I get an employer who's got 20 employees, and they want the first one drawn up, but the rest, I'll do the rest at a discount, because obviously we've got that working shell.
Yeah.
And what I also do is I do provide people with not just PDFs, but Word documents. So, and my caveat always is that at the time of me giving this to you, it's the correct law. If you use that in about a year's time, it might not be correct, but we do that. And then the ones with restrictions, they can vary. So they can go from 350, 450, 550, depending on how complex they are. We've got directors' contracts. They can get very complex as well, depending on what people want in them. Sometimes people want really complex bonus structures, pension structures. It just depends on what they're asking for.
But with the basic one, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge expense then, is it? If it's in the long run, if it's gonna save you a lot of hassle, it's something worth paying to actually make sure all your ducks are in line, and you're not going to have an issue later on.
I mean, the other thing as well, there's lots of companies out there, and we do it as well. We offer like HR support packages. So, we'll go, okay, for 12 months, we do this. We provide you with all the contracts, as many as you want. If you started off in 20 people, and you've got 30 by the time that you've left, our price doesn't change; it stays the same. We do all the HR.
And then I suppose with that, they can call you up at any time if they have any HR questions. That's probably a really good thing to do, to be fair, for any business. It takes basically I'd be making my headache your headache.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is, because it's like what we say: leave the experts to do
what they do best.
They're good at, look,
and you focus on your business.
Exactly. I've got clients who are in the manufacturing business.
We're going to have to wrap it up here. We've only got 45 seconds left. So I didn't realize how quickly that those 25 minutes went. But thank you very much for coming. And I'd love to have you on another time. I'm sure there's much more that you could, give to the show. Thanks again. And hopefully, guys, if you want to contact Neelam, I'm sure she's mentioned who she is and where she is many a times. Right. This is one more show left, guys. So if you can let me know what you want the show on. I'm planning on doing some litigation law next week, hopefully. So, inshallah, I will see you all next week. Allah Hafiz.
Chai Hub, your special